discussion with Frank J. Barrett Jr. regarding property on Broad Street.
Now that I think about it.
Good evening.
Barrett Architecture from White River Junction. Nice to be here. Do you have an easel or something I could?
Boy, we usually do.
We have them over there in the corner.
It's a little bit easier for me to give my spiel, as it were.
You have to use the microphone, sir, so the TV can pick you up.
All right. So again, for the record, Jay Barrett, or officially Frank J. Barrett Jr., from Barrett Architecture in White River Junction, Vermont. And it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I enjoy doing work in Claremont. We've got the Goddard block going, which you folks were very instrumental in about a year ago, and I thank you. I've got some very quick, sort of fast and dirty visuals to help the discussion. This is a very conceptual discussion. It's more just to sort of feel out the, what questions, comments, opinions the board might have to help us get some direction for this project. But while the young lady's setting the easel up.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. I first started doing some work, and by the way, this is all pro bono work that I'm doing for Turning Points. I really admire and appreciate the work that they do. Last June, they reached out to me at the recommendation of Jeff Barrett, no relation, he spells his name with E on the end, and I got to know Jeff about 3 or 4 years ago, and I helped him with his Water Street project. But at that point, the network was being offered the property at 231 Broad Street that had been an accountant's office and had been vacant. And it seemed like a nice offer. So Jeff recommended that the agency have an architect look at the property and determine, if it was something that was worth pursuing, what the costs might be to get it to better suit their needs, et cetera, et cetera. So we took a good look at it, put some preliminary numbers together as far as costs of renovation to get it to better suit the agency's needs, et cetera, and they sort of chewed on that during the latter part of the summer and into the fall. And then in October, we thought it would be good to maybe look at some other properties that were available. The agency wants to very much stay in Claremont. It does work throughout Sullivan County, but Claremont seems like an ideal home, and they very much want to stay here. The agency presently has property on School Street, which they've outgrown and is really, in a variety of ways, not suitable. So while we were considering the potential gift of property at 231 Broad Street, we also looked at 4 other properties in late October, and they all had some potential. All 4 were right in the downtown, but we came back to the 231 project. Property because it seemed in many ways to be the best fit. One of the really appealing things about the property, other than the fact that it's a gift, but it has a really nice location. It's back from the street. It's got a level of privacy so that people who are accessing the services are not walking right in off of the street or not in a building that's like a fishbowl. We looked at the Ruleyard property on Broad Street, but again, it's a very good building. and in many ways had a lot to offer. But as an example, it's right on the street, and there's no discreet way of coming or going from that property or parking your car if you're escaping an abusive spouse or something like that. So the property on at 231 Broad Street has a lot of appeal because you enter from the back. It's got well landscaped. It's set back from the road. It's got a very nice, quiet, peaceful atmosphere to it, and so we sort of kept coming back to that. Several weeks ago, what came up on our radar screen was the potential availability of the property next door at 127 Broad Street. 227. Yes. That property was potentially available. So we've been weighing the pros and cons out and trying to get our arms around very preliminarily. I haven't done any detailed architectural plans yet. It's all been looking at just raw square footage and trying to say what could work, what could be, an economical direction for the agency to take, and get the best bang for the buck. Because of course they're looking very long term out. If they're going to make this move, it's not something for 5 years and then go somewhere else. It's really trying to get the agency into a really good position, a good place, for the conceivable long haul, probably long after I'm on this side of the turf. So what I did actually this morning, last night and this morning, was got from Nancy Merrill this piece of the town's GIS mapping system. Showing the two properties. Here's Breck Avenue, here is Broad Street, here is the property at 231 Broad Street that the agency now owns. They have accepted that as a gift, as I understand it. And this is the property which is in play, possibly. There might be some question as to that, but nonetheless, there are discussions ongoing with the owner, I think. And there are opinions as to whether this should become part of the mix or not. And so what I have done, just to have a very broad brush discussion with the board tonight, with you folks tonight, is several overlays using this piece of the GIS mapping system. Obviously, if things go ahead, the property will need to be measured, it'll need to be surveyed, it'll need site plan review, and those are all important steps. But as I tell people, it's a little bit like peeling an onion. This is the very first layer to potentially come off. So this gave me what I needed to then do what architects really enjoy doing, and that is taking a piece of yellow trace paper, at least architects of my age. I've got guys younger than me that love computers. I still like to hand draft and sketch. So I sort of did an overlay to scale, but cleaned up a little bit so that you can sort of better see it. And again, here's Breck Avenue, here is Broad Street, here's the property that we presently own, 231, and here's property which is still in play, 227, or potentially in play, at 227 Broad Street. A couple of things to keep in mind. You'll note that there is no driveway that comes in off of Broad Street to service our property, but there is a right-of-way, a 10-foot right-of-way across the back of the 227 property that then comes into, there's an existing parking area. And again, the last use of this property was, as I understand it, an accountant's office. Both of these properties were developed in the 1850s, we believe. And it's amazing that although at a quick glance they don't look quite the same, they're almost identical properties as far as their footprint goes. Full two-story houses in the front, measuring approximately 30 feet deep and 24 feet wide. Both of them have single-story porches in the front. On 231 Broad Street, that porch has been enclosed and is an office space. On 227, it's still an open porch with a lot of its very nice ornate trim. Both of them have back L's that are 1.5 stories high with side porches, and then both of them have barns, almost 2-story barns on the back. On our case, the barn garage area is unfinished. We've looked at what it would take to finish it off, which is no simple undertaking. As in the L, which is a story and a half, looking at getting a modern fire-rated stair into that and other things, so that and you start realizing that although the front house, with very, very little effort, could be very, very nice office space again, they need more office space than just what the front house has to offer. And so, we start looking at developing the back alley and the garage, and we realize that that removing those two pieces and putting an addition on of some kind is probably something that gives a lot more bang for the buck, as it were. And spends their resources in a much better way. As I say, a couple of weeks ago, conversation started turning to what if we were to acquire the property at 227, which has been on the market, and what could we potentially do with that? So today I did 2 overlays looking at potential footprint. Additions onto each of these, onto first our building at 231, and then if we were to acquire the other property, looking at doing something that combines both of those. The difficulty that we're having is that we, again, to use their resources to get the best bang for the buck, as it were, it is far better to take off the L and the side porch and the back barn and do something new, regardless of whether we acquire this property or not. Keeping the front house, which is actually in very good shape, and utilizing that makes a lot of sense. That's good use of their funds. So, taking this off and getting an addition built onto it, the conundrum that I got into was, I said, it's going to be difficult to get a really good addition on the back of this without acquiring the property next door. But if we acquire the property next door, do we raise all of the building that is there, including the front house, and try to do some kind of an addition that connects things up, keeping both front houses, but that gives us more space than we need? Or do we do something that gives us the addition that we need now and the additional space and carries us well into the future, but we don't really need the front part of this house? So it seemed a week ago or so when Turning Points made got on the schedule to appear before you folks, that again it would be good to sort of tell you where we're at, what we're struggling with, what options we've got, and tomorrow I'm going to meet with the board and sort of crunch some numbers and go over what we hear from you folks tonight. And then try to start making some direction from there. So again, this is existing, just a little bit easier to read than the town's aerial photograph. It shows the zoning setbacks and basic dimensions of the lot and the basic placement of the 2 buildings. So the first scheme I came up with actually was utilizing the 227 lot, but if we were to completely raise the existing house. The condition of the existing house, it's been bled for some period of time as a rental property, absentee landlordism. Certainly the connecting L and the barn are kind of distressed. The barn is actually quite distressed. The connecting L and side porch portion is still a decent building to a point, but certainly if it were to be utilized, it would require all new plumbing and electrical and a pretty significant overhaul. So the first little site plan that I developed was completely raising the property, the buildings at 227, taking off the back L and the unfinished story-and-a-half garage on the back of the 231 house, keeping the front part of that house pretty much as it is, other than some interior renovations. But otherwise, it really doesn't need much. It was in surprisingly very good condition. The previous owner took good care of it and didn't bleed it. And then putting a nice two-story addition on the back, and something that I'm not worried about architecturally, how it would appear and work with the existing house as well as the other properties on Broad Street, and something that would give in the future, 40 years from now or whatever, if they needed some more space, they could expand onto the front portion of the 227 lot. But it would keep the same traffic patterns, maybe a better driveway coming in across the back of the 227 lot. And if something like this were to go forward, obviously, and both lots were to be in Turning Point's ownership, the lots would be merged for all of the obvious reasons. Client parking along the back, nice entrance coming in, and then office space, a corridor office space, 2 floors of office space, some conference room space, handicapped toilets, and all of that thing in the type of thing in the L, and then some nice office space in the front part of the house. Maybe an outdoor area or play area for some young kids, or whatever the case might be. As I say, parking that is remote and in the back and somewhat shielded with some nice landscaping, because obviously the type of things that Turning Point deals with, someone being out of sight from an abusive spouse or something like that is hugely important, and the executive director can speak better to that than I. And then the existing parking in the back, which was developed by the accountants when they were in this building, and which was approved by the city, keeping that for staff parking. So I said, this could architecturally work pretty well. It could possibly even work shifted over if we were to not acquire the 227 piece. And again, that's still something that's very much in play. Should work itself through, I think, pretty soon. But maybe pulling this forward, maybe clipping it a little bit, because of course there's a 10-foot setback, zoning setback. So getting a good-sized addition on the back and trying to get something that works efficiently, but is also cost-effective and architecturally appropriate, I think has some good merit to it. It would still require utilizing the right-of-way across the back of the 227 lot, but that right-of-way, no one's questioning it, and I think it's legally pretty clear. And there has not been any problem with that right-of-way for the past 30-odd years or so that the property's been used, the 231 property's been used by the accountants. So that was sort of one scheme, just for sake of conversation. And again, I haven't gone to the point yet of doing even preliminary architectural plans as to what it might look like. But I'm confident that were we to develop something in this direction, it could be something that's architecturally appropriate and would be an asset to the property, not a detriment to it. So the other thing that we looked at, because we were toying with this last week in a pretty extensive board meeting where I was on the phone, and we were trying to work through the benefits, the pluses and the minuses of, again, the 227 property, the Blue House, so-called. And that is, if we were to acquire this property, in addition to the property that we already own at 231, and were we to try to keep the front house, forced to keep the front house, heavily suggested to keep the front house, whatever the case might be, what could we do taking the L's and the barns off of both of these and then connecting them up in some way. Again, main entrance coming in off of Breck Avenue, which I think works really well from a traffic standpoint, merging the two lots, keeping staff parking in the back, maybe a nice play area, an outdoor play area here for some children, and creating in this new addition that connects up both of the existing houses, a two-story, an efficient two-story addition that would have all the appropriate, fire-rated stair, handicap toilets, reception area, covered handicap ramps, and all of those things that need to come into play when you're considering redevelopment of a property like this. And I came to the same conclusion that I said, even without doing detailed floor plans yet, or even preliminary floor plans and preliminary elevations, and a lot of my work is in historic preservation in New Hampshire and Vermont. And so a lot of my work is architecturally very traditional. I said, I think that this scheme could also work very well. Obviously, it would be a larger building in the back, but not overwhelmingly larger. But it, again, could work well aesthetically, architecturally, and look appropriate. The biggest problem with this scheme is that to connect up the two buildings with a building with an addition that is efficient, it gives us more square footage than we need. And whether there would be a sister agency that could take some of that square footage or something, I don't know. It's not a question actually I've asked, because this has been tracking kind of quickly. But nonetheless, we thought last week, after a good discussion with board members, with the Turning Points board, since no matter what we're going to be doing, it's going to be spending a fair amount of money. It's going to come from grants and fundraising and a variety of other sources, as well as selling at some point their property on School Street. That before we got too far along, it would be good to have a meeting with you folks and just sort of say, here's what we're struggling with, here's what our options appear to be. And start getting input from the planning board. So that's sort of an overview. Hopefully I didn't get you too confused between the 227 and the 231s and whatever.